Remember to fuel your body to fuel the performance that you are desiring. So championship level performance requires championship level nutrition. Hi, I'm Dr. J, and welcome to this week's 5-Minute Friday. I have a background of a master's in human performance / applied sports science and a doctorate in sport and performance psychology. This week, our episode is going to cover RED-S, or relative energy deficiency in sport. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more 5-Minute Fridays with your Dr. J. This is a complex subject, a complex piece where we're going to cover how nutrition weighs into our athletic performance, but not only that, how it affects our body's function to allow us to continue to perform and to allow us to continue to have our body work regularly and to be able to maintain normal function. As we approach athleticism and we approach performance, one of the things that we're going to need to look at is how important nutrition is in that picture. And not only do we need nutrition to maintain our everyday function, when we're athletes, our fuel demands increase as our sport demands cause them to increase, right? So not only are we getting up, breathing, living, going through the day on a normal space, we're additionally adding more activity, more movement, we're adding stress to our body, we're challenging the capabilities of our body, right? And as we get more adept at our sport, we often spend more time working on that sport, right? And that could be at any level and that can be at any intensity as well, right? So whether we're a pro athlete or we're a recreational athlete or we're someone who is still growing up within the sport that we're falling in love with, all of these pieces matter. So the female triad, which is low energy availability, changes in menstrual cycle, most likely amenorrhea, which is the stopping of a menstrual cycle, and then loss in bone density. And once research continued and they started to dive deeper into this, they realized that these symptoms and the causes of these symptoms were not just affecting women, but they were also affecting men as well. And so they renamed this to be RED-S, right? Relative energy deficiency in sport. And they realized that it can affect any age group, it can affect any competition level, it can affect any sport. And additionally, it can affect any of our body systems, right? So that mention that we made before to nutrition being something to sustain us from an everyday capacity, we add sport into this picture and we're adding stress, we're adding the need for greater energy availability and the need for increased rest as our body is able to recover from these things, right? Because we look at what the opposite of fight and flight is, which we typically try to utilize to our benefit in sport, it's rest and digest. And if we're not able to rest and digest and we're not able to differentiate between those two halves, our body gets stuck in limbo and it's going to decide what is the most necessary process that it needs to use. And typically the functions that are more readily available during our rest and digest times are not the things that help us during sport, right? Something for us to take a look at within this is which athletes are most susceptible to this. This is going to fall within the range of sports or dance or performance where being lighter is perceived as a performance advantage, or where the aesthetics or the outward appearance of that athlete is determined for determining their personal success. But that lightness or lack of mass, right, or that build of that athlete might not be skill related at all. When we look at nutrition and we look at these things from an athletic standpoint, our greatest concern is that we are fueling the body for the performance that we are desiring. And that can be difficult because at times we make the assumption of the visual piece of it matching the functional piece of it. And within that, genetics gets into the picture, personal restrictions as far as what each person's body is able to do, what our genetics will allow us to do, and how we're able to express those things. A few risk factors going into this would include an increase in overall training load, puts us at risk. A reducing in our rest periods for training puts us at risk. Following an exclusionary or a restrictive diet can put us at risk, as well as training excessively in a fasted state can also put us at risk of these things. Although these are not the only ways to identify if this relative energy deficiency in sport is occurring, these are two very signaling things for the men and women as far as real indicators of, all right, let's get an assessment or let's get an evaluation. All right, first, so the women, having a change in your menstrual cycle can be an indicator of this. It is not the only indicator, but it can be an indicator in this, which is leading us to understanding there's a hormonal disturbance happening within your body. For our men, the lack of a morning erection or stunted growth or delayed puberty, a positive eating disorder screening can be an identifier of this. but that does not mean that is the only factor that can identify it for men, and vice versa with women. In addition to having missed periods or having big changes in your menstrual cycle, for those that are on birth control, this can give us false signals if you're experiencing this, because the birth control is a hormonal regulatory pill, right? And this can give you false signals of being in a healthy state due to the use of it, right? And so this can also affect our bone density, and this can also affect metabolism. And let's think about metabolism from the body's ability to utilize nutrients to help it restore and to help it grow and go through daily necessary functions. And a small disclaimer before we go through the list of some of the other symptoms: if an athlete is starting this phase or within this space and is at a normal body mass, they might not exhibit changes in body weight, because the body is incredible at creating these compensatory and regulatory options. Your body might steal from other areas, and it might determine that movement, as in your exercise or as in your sport specific training, is more important than some of these unnecessary functions which occur during those rest to digest times. It might put kind of a stop to those, but having a stop on some of those systems affects other regulatory systems within our body, right? Our endocrine system is incredibly wired so that if it receives signals from our different signaling hormones or different signaling organs, those operations are not going to occur. But if our emphasis is being put on movement, the body is going to respect that, but it does not mean that it is going to make it easier or it's going to put your body in a more favorable position in the long term. And that's where our concern is what do these effects lead to in the long term? So in addition to the sex-specific identifiers, additional symptoms can include sleep disturbances, gastrointestinal disturbances, trouble concentrating or lack of concentration, having a depressed mood, having increased anxiety, having increased fatigue, having an increased frequency in minor illnesses, having an increased frequency of injury, hormonal disturbances, and for those that are still growing or of that pediatric age, having slowed or stunted growth can be affected. So after we look at all this information and we really start to assess this, how do we prevent this from happening, right? Because there are going to be changes in our exercise intensity. There are going to be changes within the competitive year of every sport. When we have more performances versus having practice and being in off season, being in post season, all of those things weigh in. And especially if you're a student at the same time, being a student athlete has a different set of stressors, a different set of demands, and a different set of responsibilities. As our training intensity changes, we need to be prepared to have our nutrient needs and our fueling for performance change at the same time, right? So we need to mirror these things and match these things, right? It's not like if you got more homework, you would be doing less work. If you get more homework, there's more work, right? And so the same thing with our body. If our body is doing more work, we need to sustain it with the fuel it needs to continue to do this more work so that we can have these performance improvements, but also not have these performance improvements that might be minor or only last for a small bit before our body cannot handle that level anymore. We want it to be a long-term thing, and we want it to be a sustainable thing. So moving forward, as we make our bodies more resilient and we protect our bodies from these small things that can be prevented from becoming bigger things, we look at making sure that we're getting carbohydrates before practice and after practice so that we have energy readily available for our body to restore and to start replenishing once we stop training. And in addition to that, even if you are eating enough on a day-to-day basis, if we're not eating enough surrounding our training sessions, that can cause some within-day energy deficiency type occurrences. And so our goal is to create a system that you can follow as an individual, something that is sustainable and something that makes sense for your sport demands as well as your personal needs. I hope that this week's 5-Minute Friday has been informative to you. This topic is kind of near and dear to my heart. In my personal experience as an athlete, I know that I would not have been as resilient as I was from a physical standpoint had I not been fueling my body for the performance that I was having. And jokingly, I say I eat like a horse, but the thing is, we need to fuel our body to be able to have this performance, to be able to have these things readily available, right? And so timing is very important. The quality of our nutrition is very important, and having a long-term plan for this is very important, right? So if that means we need to have snacks in our backpack, we have snacks in our backpack. If that means that maybe we need to prepare a lunch or at least plan ahead so that we have a lunch following practice, that's an important step, but a vital step at one. All right. And so my encouragement for you is to continue working hard, but also make sure that you're continuing to fuel your body with that same intensity and rest your body with that same intensity. This is your reminder that sometimes just because we can doesn't mean that we always should. And so remember to fuel your body to fuel the performance that you are desiring. So championship level performance requires championship level nutrition. Once again, I'm Dr. J, and thank you for tuning into this week's 5 Minute Friday. And as always, be refined by the grind.